To you guys to do a quick intro of myself before we get started. For those of you who don't know, my name's Canaan Linder. In college was an indie game developer, so I created a couple games between myself and my friends. Was a software engineer after college, and actually am now working on a startup in the blockchain space having to do with gaming. The talk today won't be focused much on my startup. I'll leave you with a quick shill at the end, but we'll mostly be focused on the gaming space, kind of, how it's evolved quickly over time, getting a little into blockchain, some background there, some of the stuff you may know, some of the stuff you may not. So hope to at least teach you one thing, during this talk, and hopefully come away with some good discussion. Sweet. Can everybody see my screen right now?
Yes.
Awesome. Sweet. Okay, so let's talk quickly about the gaming industry. So, the first thing you need to understand, and you'll hear these two terms a lot in the gaming industry, is there are two really types of buckets you can put a game developer into. You have AAA studios, which, are AAA, you'll see on the page. And these are companies usually of, 100 to 1,000 plus. Some of the ones we know, Epic Games, EA, Riot. These are the companies with, hundreds, thousands of employees, $100 million budgets, billion-dollar games. Then on the other side, you have the indie game developers. Those are the few guys in the garage. We know Gods Unchained, CryptoKitties, and Axie Infinity, but everybody in the blockchain space you would consider an indie gamer or an indie game developer. A good way to test it is ask your friend, who doesn't know anything about gaming, have you heard of this game? If they say yes, then it's a AAA company. If they say no, then it's an indie game. Now, the go-to-market path per games is pretty different, and it's a passionate industry, and so I'll kind of talk about it overall. Now, the difference, there are two main buckets in kind of the development of a game to release. You have developers and publishers. Developers are engineers like myself who get in a group with their friends and all of a sudden say, hey, we want to create a great game. They spend anywhere from the next 6 months to 10 years creating that game, usually in the indie space, living somewhere between home and a friend's couch. And then after they create a game in an alpha, something like maybe a more MVP, minimum viable product of the game with a demo, they take that to a publisher. And a publisher, there are many different types, but most of what publishers do is they're pretty much the advertising house for the game. And it's all based on, there are a couple different revenue models they have, but it's mainly based off rev share. So let's say I create a great game, I take it to an investor, or in this case, a publisher. They'll say, okay, we want to publish this game. I will give you $100,000 for, your team and development over the next 6 months. And I will take a 50% rev share of the game. And I will have exclusive rights to advertise the game. And they spend millions of dollars on advertising. They go push it everywhere and, find that great ad spend. And the developer sits there developing, the publisher sits there advertising, and they meet in the middle with that rev share. What happens a lot in this industry is there are a lot of middlemen. There's a developer. Then there's a first tier of publisher. There's a second tier of publisher. Then there's the game client like Steam or like, Epic Games just released their game launcher as well. And what happens is there's so many middlemen that what I said originally, 50% to the developer and 50% to the publisher, actually looks more like maybe 10% to the publisher, 90% split through all of the other middlemen on the chain, 30% off the top to Steam, the next 40% going to the publisher number 2, and the next 20% going to the original publisher number 1, who first marketed the game and then sold even more rights to publisher number 2 to take it farther. So that's something, interesting about the industry. We can definitely talk more about that. But that's why you see a lot now that larger companies, instead of building games in-house and realizing that there are tons of developers creating great games out there, are looking to acquire. And so you have two main types of ways that big companies or AAA studios bring games to market. We have Riot, Epic Games, EA Sports. These are all developers and publishers in-house. They create the games themselves, and then they go publish them. Huge bankroll, huge, revenue stream, of course. But there's a second type, and Microsoft was probably the first one to popularize this, which is actually a large game company acquiring a lot of small studios. Not to say that Microsoft doesn't create games. They've created Halo and Xbox, etc., but they are very active in the acquisition space. Probably Minecraft being one of their biggest acquisitions to date in terms of game title. But you're seeing this more and more regularly, where small studios with great ideas are snapped up by larger studios, both as an acqui-hire and also as kind of a publisher for their games. A lot of people don't know this, actually, but Gods Unchained actually followed this exact model, probably one of the biggest in the gaming space. Gods Unchained, actually, before it was ever a blockchain game, was actually a game developed by a small studio based out of Australia. And the two founders, frankly, I don't remember their names off the top of my head, they're brothers, of Immutable Games, was then Field Games, actually acquired the Gods Unchained studio. I think it was about 5 to 6 developers that were creating the game. And they came in as the publishers of the game. I don't want to, they knew how to market, they knew how to run a great, initial asset offering for what Gods Unchained was looking to do. And they came in, acquired the studio, and actually ran the marketing campaign for them. And so that very interestingly is how Gods Unchained got started. A lot of people don't really know that it actually followed the same path that many of the great games we see today, like Minecraft, did as well. Now, I want to talk about kind of the business model behind games, because that's changed over the past 10 years drastically. And it actually switched, most people agree, because of the iPhone industry. So back in 2010, games were expensive. iPhone games were $5+, the good ones. PS4 and 5, or maybe back then it was 2, games were $60 a piece, and actually kind of still are in many cases. Same with Xbox. Now, what we see more today is the freemium model, a free game monetized through in-app purchases. And the reason this actually came to be was on the iPhone side, there was always, and still today, there's something called APO, or App Store Optimization. Same with Google. You want to be at the top of the store, so when people look for a game, they see your app first. And the way to get there was always through a cheaper price. That was one of the main things that the Apple algorithm looked at. You searched a game, it showed you the games with the most reviews and the best games for the cheapest. And so game developers kept pushing that price down. But it got to a point that they could not push the price down any further and make a profit. And so what they had to do was switch to another business model. And so what happened is they made the game free, because you can't get any cheaper than that. And instead they monetized through in-app purchases. And this was kind of the, some early companies, Kabam maybe being one, was very early kind of in understanding this. Actually, King being an early company in that space as well. And, it kind of completely transformed how games were monetized. Because of this, the primary and secondary market for these paid items are exploding. And I'll get into a little more about what those are. So the primary market is when you buy an item directly from the game developer. That is, an in-app purchase. Now, the secondary market is in many games, and we'll get into some of these cases, where you can actually take that item and buy and sell it to another player, as you would buy a pack of Pokemon cards and trade the cards on the secondary market to and from other players. The secondary market is very healthy and growing at an exponential rate. We see a primary market of about 93 billion that encapsulates about 62% of the overall gaming market revenue, and the secondary market being about 35 billion as well. We'll talk about maybe how blockchain a little later gets in, and it really fits into that secondary market as a way for maybe game developers to better monetize their revenue streams. I do not have the chat open, by the way. I know maybe we're asking some questions in there. So yeah, as we keep going, I have some, thoughts for discussion here. So let's talk then. Um, so game economies, there's the three types, and I see this as you played games, you may have seen this too, right? There's the League of Legends economy, which is Riot allows you to buy skins but not trade them. You can trade accounts, and people do quite actively in the skins on them, but there's no way once you buy the item to get it off that account. At least not anymore. There was in the beginning. World of Warcraft. There Real world trading is not banned, or excuse me, real world trading in World of Warcraft is completely bannable, but it's prolific. Some of the Chinese websites, ironically, do somewhere in the order of, I am not joking, over $100 million a month alone, in World of Warcraft gold. And these are just one site. This is just one site, out of China. So it's rather understood in the game, but it's still banned, and Blizzard bans people left and right for it. Now, Eve Online is kind of the next. It's not, I want to say it's not allowed, but it's generally accepted. I mean, everybody in game talks about items with real world value, with their credits. I think one of the biggest news articles a couple years ago was like $1 million battle in Eve Online. People do talk about these games in real world, fungible currencies. Something we'll get into, and this maybe isn't the best place to bring it up. We'll talk more of it on the Diablo Auction House, is how some of these game developers understand the secondary markets there, and actually accept it internally, but from an outward perspective, they have to say it's bannable, and have to like talk down on it, because anything but kind of ruins the reputation of their game, is being pay to win. So let's talk about the auction house. I noticed the chat. So I just want to open it right here. Ba-doom, ba-doom. Okay, thanks, Yulia. So let's talk about the auction house, and I really like. Oh, I can throw that down there. That's nice. And I really like this one quote that I actually found off Reddit. So, for a little backstory, Diablo was a action RPG game that people, could go and kill monsters, trade with each other. Just everything basically you'd expect in an MMORPG. What happened was there was a ton of real world trading. As with every RPG and MMO. And Blizzard, tried to do something interesting. They said, instead of completely axing real world trading and saying it's bannable, let's try and adopt it as part of the game style, and and see what happens. Unfortunately, it did not work. So as you see here, this is a screenshot of the Diablo auction house. People could, as you see on the top right, there's gold. They could swap between the in-game currency and dollars with what they wanted to, pay and buy and sell stuff for. And they could buy and sell their items for whatever they wanted. Now what happened was, I'll read this quote because I love it. It turned Diablo 3 from an action RPG game into an auction house simulator with a side game. What happened was traders, and what happened, players as well, just sat here in the auction house all day trying to make real money. Pretty much it gave 12 and 13-year-olds their first crack at the stock market. And this really ruined the reputation of Diablo, from being an actual game to something people could just buy and sell money for. And why would you go kill monsters when you can try and flip items for a profit and then just buy those items anyway? It was more profitable, and why not? Playing the game had no real value, and that's actually something we'll talk about perhaps in the next, one of these next slides is the pay to earn model. And why I kind of take the devil's advocate side. I think it's a horrible value proposition for games. So we can talk more about that. So, what does work, right? We talked about a model that doesn't work, and to talk about quickly, before we hit this slide, why this didn't work. So there are a couple things you have to realize with game design. Number one, economy is super important, and giving a shock to any economy that's established, with maybe tens of millions of players, as Diablo 3 was, is just going to ruin it. Like, it takes time to understand and build from an early perspective how real world money fits into the game if it is. Making every item here fungible for real world cash basically, just ruined the value proposition of the game. It went from playing for fun to playing for money. And that is a very different value proposition. Obviously, all their players, the majority, joined to play for fun and not for money. And so this was a slap into the face to all of those who joined to actually play for the game. I see. Dum dum dum. We have an interesting question. Hyperinflation. Okay, yeah, a little bit of satire there. We won't get into that too much. But what does work? So we have cosmetics trading, and this is actually something popularized probably earlier, but very popularized by CS:GO. It did make every item fungible in cash within the game, and there were still things you could earn and not sell. But on the other hand, there were these skins that weren't paid to win, but rather pay to show off. And it's a great model because players still want that, and that's one of the greatest assets of every game is how can you be better than the guy next to you? But at the same time, it didn't really ruin the core gameplay, which is you shouldn't be able to buy better armor than the guy next to you and win only because you have tens of thousands of dollars in your bank. Now, it's also interesting that early on, and we'll talk a lot more about fungibility of items, early on, CSGO items could be traded without any restriction, right? If I got an item, I could trade it tomorrow. And you started seeing all sorts of crazy things pop up. I mean, those of us who played CSGO will remember the CSGO gambling sites. The YouTubers who behind the scenes were making deals for millions of dollars owned their own sites. And so what happened very early on, or not early on, but at a certain point was Valve actually, which owns CSGO and Steam, put in a 7-day item restriction. And what this did was if you bought an item, right, from another player, you couldn't trade it for 7 days. Now, they say things like, this is to combat chargebacks, which is true. It is, and it's a great way. But really, this had the effect of almost killing the secondary market, but removing all of these CSGO gambling sites that obviously people couldn't really, gamble the skins. They could only, basically trade every 7 days or gamble every 7 days. There were specific sites like opskins.gg that tried to get around this restriction, where they actually had, it's funny, it's rather like you would imagine an Ethereum bridge to any blockchain, where they would have you send your skin to their Valve account, and then in the OP Skins marketplace, they would kind of give you that skin, and you could do whatever you wanted with it. And when you wanted to cash it out, they would push it back on the Steam. Actually, that's funny. That is pretty much a bridge from a layer 1 to a layer 2. Anyway, that was something they did. Valve then sent them a cease and desist. They didn't, and so they banned their Steam account. Millions of dollars were lost in CS:GO skins. People weren't happy. Cue the sad music. So this model of paying for cosmetics really works. But I'd love to pose a question to you guys. Do you guys play any games that have to do with real world trading? Have you guys seen any models that work and that you think would be good to kind of tell everybody about?
Sure, I can mention. I think one of the interesting examples, I play pretty much only one game, and it's FIFA. And I actually always played just like a version where you don't trade, but then I was like, okay, what is this ultimate team mode? And that ultimate team actually mode really depends on people trading, because the more you trade, the better you sort of understand the mechanics of trading, the better players you can buy, and quality of players in your team is really what allows you to be a better player as a result. So it was interesting to see that it's not only about your skills in actual game, but it's also about your trading skills. So how actually can you get as much value as possible? Being a good player helps because you get more points and able to buy more, but then you're also going to hit limitation if you don't trade and you don't get best players.
Yeah. So that's a great point. Thanks, Julia. And that's an example of a game that actually built in the economics from the start. So you can, if you want, pay for an advantage, right? Like, buy FIFA coins, I think it is, right? Buy the best players, but there's a cap. And let's say you have $100,000 in your bank account, you put it into FIFA and you buy the best players, you'll get a marginal advantage, maybe 5 to 10%. But against someone who's really skilled, that's nothing. And what you see in these other games is, where this model was not thought of before time, hand, people put in $100,000 into the game and they're 10x better than the guy next to them, even though he may be 5x better player than them, can't win.
So it's actually interesting with FIFA because their model actually doesn't allow you to put $100,000. Like, I mean, it's in a way like more like kind of indirect because you cannot buy with money points. Basically, you can buy packs what they sell, and then it's like sort of like a gambling when you buy those packs based on probabilities of like who you get there, and then you still sort of trade players in order to get the players you want.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so a couple things there. Number one, they never allow you to buy. So it's important to know whether a game allows trading or not is superfluous to actually if it happens. Every game has real world trading. There's no question about that. 100% true. But different games abstract it and try and restrict it in different ways. What Julian mentioned there is very interesting. And it's something at my company at Stardust, we actually advise businesses who use our platform to not compete with the secondary market. And that's interesting. So to talk about that, if a CSGO skin could be traded between players and also it was sold by the game itself, what happens is all of a sudden you have the game competing with the secondary market, right? I am selling for less than the game developer is selling for. And the games don't want that, obviously, because if that happens, the games are never going to sell any items if I can sell for cheaper than they can. So what they do is they implement obfuscations on top of items. One of the most practiced, because it's the most addictive, is loot crates. Or as you would say in a card store, a pack of Pokemon cards or a pack of baseball cards. You buy the pack, you open it, you get cards, you can buy and sell those cards with other players, but then the actual game company or the baseball card company or Pokemon, they don't have to compete with you because they're just selling packs while you're selling cards. And so, the end consumer can choose what they want, whether it's a chance at a rare skin for $5 or buying that rare skin for $1,000 from another player. Sweet. Okay, we have another discussion slide here. My thoughts on pay to earn. Probably something you heard early in the blockchain space, not as used anymore. But when I heard pay to earn, I thought it was a super weak value proposition. If you play a game, you should be playing the game to have fun, not, earn a living. And I think, depending where in the world you are, this is granted sometimes, in Venezuela, for example, 25 cents an hour is actually really good. But in the US, 25 cents an hour is really bad. If you want to earn money, go get a job at McDonald's. It's kind of the, what we said in the early days of RuneScape when people, said they made, 1 million an hour, go get a job and you can make 20 million an hour if you just, buy gold online. But what I want to kind of highlight here is there's a big, the way you market your game is of extreme importance. And if you market to people, oh, this game is play to earn, all of a sudden they come into the game trying to earn money. And I don't think that is a good way to attract players. I don't want to play a game because I'm looking, for a skin to make money. I want to play a game because it's fun. If I make money doing that, more power to me, and I'm happy because of it. But I really play. I work a job to make money. I play games to have a good time. Now with esports, kind of blurring the lines to be fair, but just overall and kind of 50,000 point view, I don't think pay to earn is a good value proposition. Would love to open that for discussion. Have you guys seen good instances of pay to earn, perhaps? Or if I told you a game is pay to earn, would it be more, play to earn? Excuse me. You know, are you more likely to play it? You know, what do you think?
No, I wouldn't play that.
Okay, that's an interesting. Okay, and I would love to hear. You know, can you maybe tell us a a game you play now and like why you play it? That'd be kind of cool.
Um, I don't know. I usually find my main interest is kind of like PvP games, interactive. I know. I think
Yeah.
maybe like it'll be interesting to hear. I think maybe 90% of the market I would say is casual gamers, because I see it from my friends and stuff. Like they just want to play the game and have fun. But I just
Yeah.
kind of like play the game to win. So maybe like I like Dota 2, so I like to go up on the ladder if anything. I haven't played it in a long time, but when I do, I kind of like to play to win. But play to earn is what you said. And why not just go get a job, right?
You may as well. And from a play to earn perspective, this is actually a much better done model on top of the game than in the game. And what I mean is, probably one of the largest companies to do this right now is Skills. And what they've said is, okay, everybody's playing these games for fun, and they should continue to do so. But there is a subsegment of the population who wants to go into kind of a skill-based game and use that skill to maybe earn. Or they use their great items to play and then earn. And that is, for those of you who don't know, and to explain Skills real quickly, Skills is an API that, an SDK that mobile developers, anyone, but mostly targeted at mobile developers, can put into something like maybe a single player game. And it actually makes the game multiplayer. So for example, you can go from solving a puzzle, and timing against yourself to being in a bracket with 63 other players, a 64-player bracket, and all of a sudden you have a tournament. You're all given the same puzzle, then you can see who solves it fastest. The loser in your bracket, you go to the next round, kind of a March Madness style bracket, if you will. That is something that can be built on top of the game and doesn't actually have to affect the gameplay. It's a choice by the players rather than forced on all of the players.
I had a game that I was doing play to earn. I don't know if anybody knows it, but Crypto Dozer. It came out last year, and you would play and get these dolls that you could then exchange for ETH. It ended up being about 25 cents an hour, but they're actually getting ready to release 2.0, where they have to do away with that model because they just started losing players after a while. They were saying it was a game you could, play to earn ETH, but it just didn't work out. So they're coming out with another version here where they won't exchange dolls for ETH anymore.
That's a very interesting. Thanks for that, Henry. I think look, what we can say, they won't do it. Other people definitely will, of course. But from that perspective, yeah, it's not a good retention model to keep players. I mean, think about it. Why did CryptoKitties get so popular? It wasn't because it was a great game. In fact, it wasn't a game. It was more like, it was a collectible game, sure, but it didn't have any major usage. People were breeding left and right, and it ended up being some sort of convoluted pyramid scheme. But you saw what happened to retention as soon as the market collapsed, as soon as the market inflated, and the frankly play to earn was almost negative, if not zero. People completely disregarded the game, and so that's probably what maybe they experienced early on.
Yeah, so now they're coming out with a model where they're creating the player exchange where they'll no longer give you ETH, but if you can find another player that's going to pay you for your doll, then you can do that. So we'll see how that works.
Yeah, no, that's definitely interesting, and we'll talk a little bit about more of the secondary market, I think, on the following slides, which is interesting in kind of the crypto kind of idea of that so far.
So do you think basically play to earn is more of like a positioning problem, that it's like right away kind of creates a bad image, versus like, if the game wouldn't be positioned play to earn, but like it's actually would be a fun game and you can also earn sort of on top of it, but basically it just like kind of attracts people who are like basically trying to make money versus like trying to like have fun and enjoy the platform, right?
Yeah, 100% what you said. Everything is about positioning. I mean, no different than layer ones, right? All these layer ones scale, sure, but they all position differently. And so from that perspective, like the positioning of your game and which players it appeals to is everything. play to earn is cool, right? It shows that you have an open economy, which I think has benefits. But pitching it as play to earn doesn't make me any more, doesn't give me any incentive to want to play your game, right? As Ivan said, go get a job if you want to earn. If you want to play a great game, tell me why your game is good. And playing to earn is not why your game is good. So let's talk about a little bit of blockchain. I mean, most of you guys probably know this stuff, but quick review, I think, for those of us, this is a while ago, so let's review. So we have ERC20, also known as the shitcoin standard. And this represents N coins of one type. So this is like, let's say you have dollars on the blockchain, or DAI, or Ethereum, or, well, that's ERC20, but, Tezos, any other shit coins? I forget them all. Engine is one of my competitors. Anyway, all of the ERC20s are one type coin with multiple supply. And these coins are fungible within each other. You hear fungible token a lot. What fungible means is one can be exchanged for one. So if I give you $1 and you give me back $1, that's a fair trade. So that's what fungible means. And that's what an ERC20 is. One token of Ethereum is equal to one token of Ethereum. Just use that as an example. ERC 721. You hear this as a non-fungible token. What this means is there's one token of one type. This is unique. There is not another one in the world like this, and this makes it non-fungible. This means if I have a CryptoKitty that is blue, and there's no other blue CryptoKitty in the world, I can't make a one-to-one exchange for anything else. We may agree the exchange rate is 1-to-1, but there is no one like it to imply or, enforce that exchange rate is 1-to-1. So that means, you can't swap NFTs or non-fungible tokens specifically, for other NFTs without understanding the exchange rate between them. Now, there's obviously something left off here. And that's where ERC 1155 came in. And that's really easy to understand with the Pokemon example. So what this does is it actually combines the ERC20 and 721 standard. And what happens in Pokemon is there are many different types, and these types are all non-fungible. You can't trade a Pikachu for a Charizard, for a Charmander, for a Geodude. That doesn't work. Those are all non-fungible types. But within those non-fungible types, there are many different cards of the same type. So there are 50 Charizards in the world, let's say, and you can swap those Charizards from, to and from each other, 1-to-1, because that's implied, they're both Charizards. That's an ERC20 concept. Then you have the ERC 721 concept where, you can't swap a Charizard for a Pikachu because those are different Pokemon. And so 1155 came on the scene, and what that allowed everybody to do was define specific non-fungible types, but within those or M types, right, as many types as you wanted, but within those specific types, there were N amount of each type. So, kind of like a matrix, right? Each coin number is on the side, 1 through 50 of each type, and then on the top, there are 50 different types, leads you to, 2,500 tokens, kind of, in the ecosystem. Any questions on that before I move on?
I mean, I think that this whole market around these non-fungible tokens is going to be pretty huge. I mean, this is really the next collectible space, if you will. So I'm interested you're not going to talk about Stardust here? Or?
I'll talk a little bit about it later, but, I think this is a great point to bring up and talk to that point. NFTs are awesome. And I work with game developers every day. And when I started, I tried to pitch them on the benefits of NFTs for their game. And unfortunately, what I discovered early on was that while game developers think it's cool, and there are two questions they come back at me with. And these are game developers sans blockchain. So just pitching the real world game developers who've never heard of this stuff. They say, why can't I just make it unique in my database? I say, okay, you need provable rarity, blah, 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 blah. And then they say, okay, well, how much money does this make me? And that's a tough question to answer. And I think that's coming, Henry. As you said, there are a lot of kind of, there are a lot of examples in this space, but a lot more to go. And so I think the NFT, to agree with you, is going to explode at some point in future, especially when we have something like, professional esports players cryptographically signing digital goods and showing that, signatures are unique on items. Really fucking cool. But from the NFT space currently, unfortunately, I don't think that's going to catch on quite yet. We've seen it in the speculative space. We haven't seen it yet in the gaming space, if that makes sense. People bid them up, they love them, but they have not yet understood quite how to integrate them into a larger economy of an actual game.
And what are you thinking about this in terms of the VR space? Because this is where I was also thinking about, where you're going to have these collectibles, right? You want a 56 Chevy, or you want, some kind of virtual asset that is now, an NFT. Have you any thoughts on that?
So, yes, frankly, I think the VR's biggest hurdle right now is it's just like impossible to freaking play. There are a lot of, there's Decentraland, there's Sandbox, there's what's that other one? I have some Somnium Space. You've seen a lot of actually art NFTs popping up, through Known Origin, some other companies for those VR spaces. I think that's going to be huge. I mean, as you would want, the only, Salvador Dali painting in the real world, you would also want one in the VR space. Now, I think, that being said, I think the economics are there for why people should want that, and they understand that. I just think the VR space at the moment is, a sad representation of what we hoped it would be at this stage in 2020. But when it really kicks off, I do think, to your point, NFTs are best seen and enjoyed. And that is obviously a great place for, them to be enjoyed. So I do agree with you there. Sweet. So, let's take a look at the market today. This is ripped straight from OpenSea with an overlay of DApp radar statistics. Whoops. Nope. Can I move this? Aha. So, okay, that's better. Let's take a look. So, these are the top volumes on OpenSea. And, look at the market caps of some of these. And we're early. Are we early in the week? What day is it? Thursday. Yeah, I forget all the time. So the volumes are okay overall, but I want to show how these volumes are mainly done by speculators and not by actual players. I mean, if you take a look just at the top here, right? We're seeing games with that's what is, I don't even know what Ethereum is. Somebody help me. Ethereum 150 times 26,035, we'll call it. Okay, 35,000. Oh, it's at 200. Holy shit! Thank you. Bye. Okay, $50,000 for Decentraland volume in the past 7 days, but only 235 users. That's insane. That's what is that? That's $250 a user. That's pretty crazy when you think about it. Per user per month of the game, contributing to $250 of secondary market volume per 7 days. That's $1,000 per user per month in secondary market volume. That's insane. And let me tell you, that does not happen. And so what you start to see in the blockchain space is how speculators start to dictate the price of in-game goods, for better or for worse. Take a look at Somnium Space, right? Game's not really launched yet, so I'm kind of picking on them. Maybe Crypto Voxels, 30 people contributing to $50,000 in volume over the past 7 days doesn't make a lot of sense. And so I think it's important to note here, something we've seen in the blockchain space, and this will obviously slow down, is speculation on all sorts of assets. And that may not really translate to what players want. In Decentraland, land may get so expensive that a player can't buy it anymore. Only a speculator can. Now, frankly, some places in the US, the same thing has happened. But it really opens up the economy of the game past just the players. And to speculators who are looking to trade these items daily. We talked about some of the costs maybe to players. The benefit to a game developer is a couple. Number one, they have a way, and we've seen with game asset offerings, to maybe fund the early development of the game. Number two, they have a way to appeal to a user base outside of the game. This is a great way to attract players to Decentraland, being at the top of this list. And third, very interestingly, what's happened and what OpenSea subscribes to, and Stardust does also, is a rev share model. And game developers, especially indie game developers, have a very hard time monetizing their games without following the predatory nature of what the larger games do, which is these microtransactions at every turn. Indie game developers hate that, as they should. We all hate them. Now, what they can turn to is a rev share off the secondary market. So every time players trade, and they do on the real world market, they get a cut of that trade. Instead of the secondary market maybe taking it, they get a cut. And this is huge for them because it actually doesn't really monetize their player base in a predatory way. Because actually most of that volume is being taken from these speculators who are trading these items and trying to sell them for a profit. So it's a great way for them to make money, but actually tax the speculators that that are using their games to try and profit, rather than the actual players themselves. Really important point, and I think one that we may see more in future. To kind of give you my brief understanding of this market, I really think that one of the biggest mistakes I've seen is games trying to get their currencies listed on something like Binance. I think that's kind of crazy. I think there needs to be a separation of NFT game markets and actual, actual currency to shitcoin markets. Obviously tapping into that large liquidity pool is something game developers want. But I really think that's something that we need to maybe in future find the line on, or find a better line on, is where to put the NFT speculation or the game currency speculation versus actual real world currency speculation, like Ethereum or Bitcoin or something like that. Anyone have any questions here? No worries. Keep going on. A couple more slides. Okay, I'm gonna play devil's advocate again, right? Because I love to challenge these things that we all just sit in a circle at these crypto conferences. They're like, "Oh, this is good," and this happens a lot. So, true digital asset ownership. Number one, do we really distrust gaming companies? And sure, you say to yourself, "Yes, I distrust gaming companies. They're the biggest scourge of the earth," and you may be right. But I have a question to ask you, and it may change your opinion just a little bit. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, sweating and having nightmares and worried that Riot owns your League of Legends skins, or that, Valve owns your League of Legends skins? And if you never really say, yes, I've woken up and worried about that, then my contention, right, or at least my premise to you, is that it's not really that big of a problem. And this may be because it's always been done this way, where, League of Legends has owned your skins. But if the problem isn't really on fire, and causing you to wake up with night terrors, then you kind of have to, take the next best thing and realize it's not that big of a problem. It's cool, I'm not lying, but it's not that big of a problem. And so let's go over some of the pros and cons of true digital asset ownership. Everything from, maybe applied to NFTs to other places as well. Okay, so great point, Ivan. Let's talk about that and the pros and cons. So, a game developer can't take items away from you, right? I think that's maybe what Ivan was alluding to, but we'll bring up his point here, that if the game shuts down, then, you still have your items. Maybe those items are used across different games. And if, a CSGO skin is used in League of Legends, and CSGO shuts down, you can still use that skin in League of Legends. Yes, that is valuable. I completely agree. You're right there. Now, a con is, to do that, you have to own the item. And I don't think the majority of players are really wanting to own their item. You know, no one wants to put money under their mattress. Why would they want to put all of their game items that in some cases cost upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars in CSGO cases under their mattress? So, you know, I'd love to hear from, you know, some of you, maybe what you think of true digital asset ownership. Is it something cool? Is it something that's needed? Is it something that maybe should be and just needs to be perfected? You know, where do you stand kind of on this spectrum? You know, I'll bring in the chat here as well. But does anyone have anything to say?
Hey, I just have a couple of really quick comments.
Please,
So I just want to make sure that when we're talking about true digital asset ownership, that the issue isn't conflated into one issue where really I see actually there are two issues. So on one side, there's the wallet UX. Can a user cross the bridge to, you know, writing down private keys and making sure that their stuff is secure, buying a hardware wallet if they're a really heavy user. So true digital asset ownership has this one issue, which is on the user side. And then there's the other issue that you've sort of been talking about, which is sort of like who's in control of the issuance and the mapping, let's call it, of the digital IDs, which really that's all they are, the digital IDs, to the artwork, the functionality, the games that they're allowed to be loaded into, and the games that they're allowed to be, you know, have some sort of representation or interface. So if we're going to unpack this, you need to really keep those problems separate, because you can have like one or the other or both or none at all if you're, you know, like a Fortnite. But I just wanted to say that's important. But great presentation. I've really been enjoying this.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's a great point, and kind of from, you know, maybe we want to get into a little bit about what Stardust is and how we kind of progressively decentralize, at least the true digital asset ownership. I think you made a great point there. Like, half of the problem is who owns the item, but the other half of the problem is, even if we agree on who owns the mapping, as you said, you know, how does the user then take control of that item? How do they store it? Like that's a problem in and of itself. So just bring in Ivan from the chat here quickly. So, you know, closed borders, definitely something I agree that games will go for. But, you know, I think to Matt's point, let's talk about the CSGO situation and who owns the mapping, because CSGO didn't make a mapping change, but for the blockchain equivalent, they made a smart contract change because they own the mapping. And I'll give you an example. When trading was just at its highest point in CSGO, when people were getting scammed left and right, when, you know, 12-year-old kids were gambling, and it was worse because, you know, these YouTubers would show these 12-year-old kids gambling sites and them, you know, winning millions of dollars. Then it came out that the YouTubers owned the sites and it was all fake, and, you know, the sites had a 0% chance of winning, and 12-year-old kids were gambling. CSGO had to make a change. CSGO had to say, or Valve, excuse me, had to say, you know, to combat this, we are going to do X. Now, what they did was stop items from being traded for 7 days after they were traded once, or bought once. Now, giving them a quote cooldown. Now, I don't think that was the right call, but you have to realize that they were able to make this call because, to Matt's point, they own the mapping, right? They could do this. They own the game. They own the items. In a blockchain system in which the players own the items on their, assuming they can for, you know, a second, on their Trezor, that unfortunately can't happen. That's not something you can enforce while adhering to an ERC, you know, 1155 standard or some, you know, open standard that is used by blockchain. So, you know, that's kind of one of the, I think, prime cases when I look to true digital asset ownership, which is players owning their items and owning them in that wallet, assuming all that's, you know, we'll conflate the two for a sec, Matt. Assuming that's the case, the game owner then can't make some of the decisions that they have to do in order to protect the economy of their game and protect the players from gambling needlessly, or even to adhere to the law, because obviously a game that allows 12-year-old kids to gamble is not something that looks very good. And so these are some of the kind of poignant questions that come up with true digital asset ownership that I don't really see discussed out there today. People just assume it's good. Look no farther. Sorry, I'll just keep going. Look no farther than Reddit, that's decentralizing ownership of their subreddits. DAOs, I think that's cool, but I don't agree with it, because if you look even 2 weeks ago, the owner of Wall Street Bets, the subreddit, had to be taken out by Reddit admins because he was trying to sell the subreddit to a premium trading group. Now, if that subreddit was decentralized, then all of a sudden, maybe the owner of the subreddit was in control. He can do whatever he wants. All these things dealing with true digital ownership, DAOs, it is, we think it's good, and I agree it has many good characteristics, but there's always this other end that we've enjoyed so far and that we don't realize we're losing because we're having true digital asset ownership.
Yeah, one quick example too, just to solidify this, if you lose the mapping, so this has nothing to do whether or not you own the integer in a smart contract, but the CryptoKitties example you brought up, you have the blue CryptoKitty and there's only one blue CryptoKitty, but what happens if, and there's some metadata in the smart contract that maps, like that basically spits out a URL of a blue CryptoKitty, right? Mm-hmm. So the question is, who owns the URL, right? Like what happens if they instead return a red CryptoKitty, even though your URL still says blue CryptoKitty and you have the mapping and it's in your wallet and it's on a hardware wallet, right?
Huge point. Yep.
Every game you're going to pop into, now you're red, right? And that's not cool, right? And that's going to bring down the perceived value of that asset.
Yep. No, you're 100% right about that. Something we're actually still struggling with at Stardust: what to make mutable, what not to make mutable. At what point, if you make everything mutable, does it just become a database and you're not giving actual ownership to anybody of what they own? Good question. I don't know. Let's okay. Let's talk. We can go forever on this. Let's talk quickly about usability, because we're kind of getting to the Stardust point here. Right now, part of the reason Ethereum games or just blockchain games in general have no users is because it requires, Matt, what you were talking about. A user has to figure out how to download MetaMask or Portis or Bitski, sign up for an account, understand how to own their keys. Even with Portis and Bitski, it's getting a bit better, but they still have to have some fundamental understanding of blockchain in order to play a game based on the technology. Early on, it was interesting. The CryptoKitties said somewhere in the range of 99.85% of people who came to the website to play the CryptoKitties game after all the hype actually left and never played the game. The reason being, they didn't want to download MetaMask. They had no freaking clue what Ethereum was, didn't want to use an exchange to get any Ethereum. Why the hell would they want to do that? And so that's why the usability today of these games is getting better, but still so poor compared to obviously what you're used to on a usual mobile app. So talk about Stardust really quickly. I promise not to shill too much, but what we are is an easy API for game developers to utilize ERC20, 721, and 1155 assets. I use these as standards. We're actually built on Near protocol, so we're not, ERC per se, but, talk about that later. One of the core things that I understood as an engineer at Bloomberg was that the ingenuity behind Google isn't that it uses some of the greatest technology in the world to index the internet, but rather that a user can, within a single search bar, utilize some of the most complex technology in the world and not have to know anything about it in order to gain value from it. And so that's really at Stardust what we seek to bring to a mass audience. we seek to enable game developers to better their games with blockchain technology, but yet still appeal to players in their current player bases who have no clue what that technology is, but are bettered by it. So I'll give you an example. By integrating our API, a game developer doesn't need to know what blockchain is. The players don't need to know what blockchain is. But instead, they now get access to something like a blockchain-based marketplace and a game explorer and other products and services that third parties may build off for smart contracts. Now, of course, the next question everybody in this chat's going to ask me is, Canaan, where's the private key? We'll talk about that. Now, what we do is when you sign up for a game right now in the blockchain space, you have a MetaMask, you have a Portis, you have a Bitski, you have that private key somewhere. What we do is we go for the Coinbase-like experience, which is interesting. When you sign up for a Coinbase account, you don't have a private key. All you do is a username and password. You don't ever have that private key. Now, what happens, though, is you can buy and you can sell and you can trade Bitcoin or any kind of Ether, whatever you want. But at a certain point, if you know what the blockchain is and you then have your own wallet, then you can send your coins from that Coinbase account to your blockchain wallet and migrate into a completely decentralized experience. And that's kind of the model we take. We believe that true digital asset ownership is good, but we don't believe it's a choice that should be forced on players. MetaMask, Portis, Bitski enforce that the user have digital asset ownership. We give them the choice, defaulted to no, where they play a game, and that wallet is, they don't hold the private key, but it's auth-based to where the game owner can manage it for them. But at any time, they can flip that switch and take full control of their asset. I see a chat, probably a question here. Sorry, no time to talk about private keys. Oh, okay, yep, sounds about right. Oh, hey, Bowen, how's it going? Okay, so yeah, I talked about kind of this Coinbase-like experience, but then I have here Link a marketplace, or Link the marketplace. So I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide, just with a quick screenshot. It's my last slide. Sorry, I know we're at an hour here. So, oh crap. Okay, this looked a lot better when it's not blown up. Okay, anyway, I'll talk about it. So this is the Stardust marketplace, and this is kind of our progressive decentralization technique. When you sign up for a game using our API, it's pretty simple. That game generates you a wallet, and it has the ability to manage that wallet. Now, what happens when you actually want to link the Stardust marketplace to that game is you start immediately, without even you knowing what blockchain is, start transitioning into a decentralized state. What happens is you copy this link code. Sorry, I'm not showing you mine. You provide it to the game. And what that does is the game runs as on the smart contract level, a function to link your game account to your marketplace account. And what that actually does is when that happens, your marketplace account is now kind of, think about it, is the hub connecting all the games that you then connect. Or in essence, the kind of wrapper or forward-facing interface for your own blockchain wallet. Now, of course, the game still needs a way to then manage your wallet. So all it does is request access here. And once you give that game access, you can still play that game without knowing what blockchain is. They still have access to manage your assets only for that game within your wallet. Now, at any point, you can remove that game from having access to your wallet, as you would in a smart contract wallet on Ethereum. These are auth-based permissions, very simple in anything that you'd see in any OAuth 2 system, on Google, on your iPhone, whatever you use. Now, kind of one step further from this, as I said, right now when you sign up to the marketplace, it's kind of the same setup, in fact. The Stardust marketplace now has control to manage your account. To take it, and that's now that Stardust marketplace account is at the center of everything. And so if you remove all these games from your account, now no game has access to your account, but the Stardust marketplace still does. So to take it a step further, right now for the login on the Stardust marketplace, we use, username and password, we use a Google Auth, we use a Discord-based login as well. But in future, we'll have something like a Portis or a Bitski or a MetaMask login or a login with Near. So you can bring your exact private key to the marketplace. And so you will be in a true decentralized mode. And so those are really our three modes of decentralization. We start completely managed. We then allow you to easily transition to a centrally managed wallet that every game then has to request access to. And the third step is taking that central managed wallet and transitioning it to a completely decentralized wallet that then still every game has to request access to. And so those are kind of our three steps, and how we appeal to games with, over easily 250,000 players, because their players don't really have to learn anything new. But those that know how to do this can now completely take advantage of it. Kind of going back to our mantra of, defaulting the switch to off, but giving the user the power to toggle it on. And I think that's it. Whew. Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure talking with you. I think Yulin will upload this to YouTube. And if you have any questions, my knees hurt from sitting on the bed, but feel free to message me in the near Discord, and we can talk more about it. Love to hop on call with any of you.
Thanks, Canaan. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe.
Bye.
Thank you.